The green slime wasn't supposed to work. A Japanese studio, an Italian director, American stars, and monsters that looked like they were made from spare shower curtains and Christmas lights. It was chaos wrapped in rubber suits, shot across 3 countries with a budget held together by duct tape and desperation. But something strange happened. The theme song hit the charts. The monsters became cult icons. And what started as a low-budget space opera turned into one of the weirdest sci-fi experiments of the 1960s. These are 20 weird facts about the green slime. And the bonus, a prop that was so dangerous it sent multiple actors to the hospital. Strap in. This ride gets slimy fast. Number 1. The green slime wasn't American. It wasn't Japanese either. It was something in between, a bizarre international co-production that nobody quite knew how to control. The film was produced by Toei Company in Japan, directed by an Italian filmmaker named Kinji Fukasaku, and starred American actors who'd never worked in Japan before. MGM bought the distribution rights for the West, but by then, the movie had already been shot, edited, and scored without any American input. The result was a film that felt like it came from another dimension. The acting style was pure Hollywood B-movie. The special effects were distinctly Japanese tokusatsu. The pacing was European art house meets Saturday morning serial. And the music, well, that was its own beast entirely. Nobody on set spoke the same language fluently. Scripts were translated multiple times, losing meaning with each pass. Actors would deliver lines in English, while the Japanese crew shouted directions they couldn't understand. The Italian director communicated through translators and hand gestures. It should have been a disaster. It was a disaster. But somehow, that disaster created something unforgettable. Because the green slime didn't follow anyone's rules. It was made in the gaps between cultures, and that's exactly what made it strange, sloppy, and absolutely magnetic. Number 2. Before cameras rolled, the project had a different name and a completely different vision. Originally titled Battle Beyond the Stars in early development, the film was meant to be a serious space thriller about contamination and survival. The script featured hard science, astronaut protocols, and psychological tension. No monsters, no laser battles, just claustrophobic dread aboard a space station, facing unknown danger from an asteroid mission gone wrong. But when Toei executives read the screenplay, they panicked. Too slow, they said. Too serious. Japanese audiences wanted kaiju, wanted spectacle, wanted creatures they could see and fear. So they brought in a new writer who transformed the contamination threat into physical monsters. The green slime was born, literally rewritten into existence halfway through pre-production. The director, Kinji Fukasaku, later admitted he hated the change. He'd signed on for psychological horror, not rubber suit creatures. But the studio didn't care about his artistic vision, they cared about ticket sales. And they knew monsters sold. So the serious script was gutted, creatures were designed, and what could have been a tense chamber piece became a B-movie creature feature. Fukasaku tried to salvage his original vision by keeping some dramatic tension between the characters, the love triangle, the military protocols. But every time he built atmosphere, a green blob with tentacles would slither into frame and ruin it. The movie he wanted to make died in rewrites. The movie that replaced it became a cult classic. Number 3. The theme song hit before the movie did. Composed by Charles Fox with lyrics by Louis Kahn and performed by Richard Delvey and the Venture-style session musicians, The Green Slime was released as a single months before the film premiered. It was psychedelic, groovy, and absolutely infectious. Radio DJs played it as a novelty track. Teenagers bought the 45 RPM record. It climbed charts in Japan and made respectable showings in parts of Europe. But here's the weird part. Most people who heard the song had no idea it was from a movie. The lyrics were abstract enough that it could have been about anything. Love, drugs, environmental disaster, take your pick. So when the film finally opened, audiences walked in expecting something completely different. They'd been grooving to this catchy space-age tune and assumed the movie would match that energy. Instead, they got slow-burn space station drama interrupted by tentacled blobs electrocuting people. The tonal whiplash was immediate. Some theaters reported people laughing during serious scenes because they couldn't reconcile the campy song with the film's attempts at genuine tension. It created an identity crisis that the movie never recovered from. Was it serious sci-fi or campy fun? The song said camp. The director wanted serious. The studio wanted spectacle. Nobody won, but the song, that infectious, ridiculous, groovy theme song, it outlived the movie. People who've never seen The Green Slime can still hum the tune, and that might be the film's greatest achievement and biggest curse. Number 4. Robert Horton didn't want to be there. The Wagon Train star took the lead role of Commander Jack Rankin because he needed the money. His career had stalled, and when MGM offered him an international co-production, he said yes without reading the script. Big mistake. The moment he arrived in Tokyo, he realized what he'd signed up. Scripts change daily. The effects looked cheap even by 1968 standards. And he had to pretend to be terrified of monsters that looked like rejected Muppets covered in slime and Christmas bulbs. Horton was embarrassed. Between takes, he'd drink heavily and refuse to socialize. The Japanese crew nicknamed him the Angry American. Even the director stopped giving him notes because Horton would just glare and walk away. But here's the thing. His misery works on screen. His genuine frustration reads as intensity. He hated every second of filming, and that hatred somehow made his performance believable. Number 5. The monsters weren't designed by artists. They were designed by accountants. When Toei executives demanded creatures for the film, they gave the effects team a budget so small it could barely cover materials. No elaborate animatronics, no detailed sculpting, just enough money for foam rubber, wire frames, and whatever else they could scrounge from hardware stores. So, the effects crew got creative. They built the green slime creatures using techniques borrowed from tokusatsu films like Godzilla, but with a fraction of the resources. The bodies were simple foam shapes. The tentacles were stuffed fabric tubes with wires inside. And those iconic glowing red eyes and electricity effects, Christmas tree lights and camera tricks. The entire monster design was reverse engineered from what they could afford rather than what looked good. And it showed. When the first suit was completed, the director took one look and asked if they were serious. The producer shrugged and said, "Make it work." So they did. They shot the creatures in low light. They used rapid cuts to hide imperfections. They added sound effects to distract from the visible seams and wobbling tentacles. The monsters moved slowly because the actors inside couldn't see properly and kept tripping over their own rubber appendages. One performer fainted from heat exhaustion inside the suit and had to be cut out with scissors. Another got tangled in his own tentacles during a take and fell off a platform, breaking 2 ribs. The creatures weren't scary. They were barely functional, but they were cheap. And in B-movie economics, cheap beats good every single time. Number 6. The love triangle wasn't in the original script. It was added during filming because the studio decided the movie needed heart. So they shoehorned a romantic subplot between Commander Rankin, his rival Commander Elliot, and the space station doctor, Lisa Benson. The problem? None of the actors had chemistry. Robert Horton actively disliked his co-star, Richard Jekyll. The two men barely spoke off camera. And Luciana Paluzzi, playing Lisa, was caught in the middle of their Cold War. She'd try to rehearse scenes, and the 2 male leads would refuse to make eye contact with each other. The director had to shoot their confrontations in separate takes and edit them together because they wouldn't stay in the same frame. But the studio insisted on the romantic tension, so the script kept getting rewritten with more and more emotional scenes. Love confessions in the middle of alien attacks, jealous arguments during evacuations, dramatic stares while monsters slithered past in the background. It was absurd. The actors knew it, the crew knew it, even the translator knew it, reportedly telling the director in Japanese, "This is very stupid," but they filmed it anyway. And somehow, the awkwardness works in the film's favor. The relationships feel forced and uncomfortable because they are forced and uncomfortable. These aren't people in love. They're professionals trapped in a nightmare trying to maintain some semblance of normal human interaction while everything falls apart. The bad chemistry accidentally became good drama, and nobody planned it that way. Number 7. The space station sets were borrowed from another movie, an unfinished Italian sci-fi film that had run out of money mid-production. Toei bought the sets at a discount, shipped them to Japan, and repainted them for the green slime. But there was a problem. The sets were falling apart, the paint was chipping, the walls wobbled when actors leaned against them, and those iconic hexagonal floor panels visible in nearly every scene, they were loose. During one chase sequence, an actor's foot went straight through the floor. Production stopped for 2 hours, while the crew patched the hole with plywood and cardboard. In another scene, you can actually see a wall panel fall off in the background while the actors pretend nothing's wrong. The editor tried to cut around it, but there wasn't enough coverage. So, the moment made it into the final film. It's accidentally perfect because the green slime is about a place coming undone, and the sets were literally coming undone around the actors. Cheap, broken, and held together by sheer willpower, just like the movie itself. Number 8, the laser guns didn't work. They were props built by a Japanese toy company, plastic rifles painted silver with lights that were supposed to flash when the actors pulled the triggers. Except the batteries died constantly, and the wiring was so poorly done that the lights would flicker randomly or not turn on at all. So the actors had to mime firing weapons that didn't light up, and the effects team had to add the laser blasts in post-production. But here's where it gets weird. The toy company that built the props also manufactured them as actual toys for kids. The same guns the actors used on screen were sold in Japanese toy stores, and they worked better than the movie versions. Parents would buy these toy laser rifles for their children, and the lights would function perfectly. Meanwhile, on set, professional prop masters were frantically replacing batteries every 10 minutes just to get through a single scene. Robert Horton reportedly threw his gun across the set after it failed to light up during an important dramatic moment. The prop master retrieved it, replaced the batteries, and handed it back. Horton pulled the trigger. Nothing. He threw it again. This happened 3 times before they just gave up and shot the scene without any practical effects. The VFX team added everything later, and when the movie finally premiered, kids in the audience were playing with better functioning versions of the same weapons they were watching on screen. The toys were more advanced than the movie props. In the world of low-budget filmmaking, that's not just ironic, it's perfectly on brand. Number 9. The film's Italian director, Kinji Fukasaku, wasn't Italian, he was Japanese. But because of international co-production rules and distribution agreements, his name was listed in some territories as Kenneth Crane to make the film seem more Western. It was a common practice in the 1960s. Studios would Angloize Asian names to appeal to American and European audiences. Fukasaku hated it. He later said in interviews that seeing his work credited to a fake name felt like being erased. But the studio didn't care about his feelings. They cared about ticket sales, and they believed American audiences wouldn't take a sci-fi film seriously if it had a Japanese director's name on it. So they whitewashed the credits. Kenneth Crane became the face of the film in the West, while Kinji Fukasaku remained unknown outside of Japan for years. It wasn't until decades later, when film scholars started researching the movie's actual history, that Fukasaku's real contribution was properly acknowledged. By then, he'd gone on to become one of Japan's most respected directors, known for gritty crime dramas and, eventually, battle royale. But The Green Slime remained a weird footnote in his career, the movie where his name wasn't even his name. In later interviews, he was asked about it, and his response was always the same. I made a movie about monsters. The studio made me a monster too. They just called it by a different name. And number 10. The finale almost killed someone. The climax of the film features the space station being destroyed, explosions ripping through corridors, characters running through flames and sparking electrical panels. It was supposed to be the big, spectacular ending, the moment where everything the crew had built would literally blow up on camera, but nobody properly calculated the explosive charges. On the day of shooting, the pyrotechnics team rigged the hallway with too much material, way too much. When the director called action and the charges detonated, the explosion was massive, bigger than planned, louder than expected, and far more dangerous than anyone anticipated. A fireball shot down the hallway faster than the actors could run. Robert Horton later said he felt the heat on the back of his neck and genuinely thought he was going to die. Luciana Paluzzi tripped over debris and nearly got caught in a secondary blast. The stunt coordinator screamed for everyone to get out, but the actors were trapped between two explosion points. For 10 seconds, it was real chaos, not movie chaos, actual danger. The cameras kept rolling because the operators didn't know what else to do. When the smoke cleared, everyone was alive but shaken. The director reviewed the footage and realized they'd accidentally captured the most intense sequence in the entire film. It was raw, terrifying, and completely unplanned. They used every frame. Because in a movie about survival against impossible odds, nothing sold danger better than actual danger. The finale worked because it was real, and everyone involved was lucky they survived it. Number 11. The dubbing process was a nightmare. Because the film was shot in Japan with American actors who spoke English, Japanese crew members who spoke Japanese, and an Italian director who spoke both poorly, nobody on set could communicate clearly, so every line was recorded with the intention of being redubbed later. But when the actors returned to Los Angeles for ADR sessions, they discovered the footage had been edited completely differently than they remembered shooting it. Scenes were rearranged, dialogue was changed, and worst of all, their mouth movements didn't match the new lines. Robert Horton spent 3 days in a recording booth, trying to sync his voice to footage that had been sped up, slowed down, and recut without his knowledge. He'd deliver a line, watch the playback, and realize his lips were saying something completely different. The sound engineer kept asking him to try again, and again, and again. After the 15th take of one particular scene, Horton reportedly ripped off his headphones and walked out. They had to finish his ADR with a voice actor who sounded close enough. If you listen carefully during certain scenes, you can hear it. The voice doesn't quite match. The inflection is off. That's not Robert Horton. That's someone pretending to be Robert Horton, pretending to fight monsters. Its layers of artifice stacked so high that reality disappeared completely. And somehow, in a movie about fake monsters attacking a fake space station, that extra layer of fakeness just made everything feel more surreal. Number 12. The slime itself was a biohazard. The effects team needed something that looked alien, moved like it was alive, and could stick to the monster suits during filming. So, they created a mixture of corn syrup, food coloring, and industrial lubricant. It looked perfect on camera, bright green, gooey, and genuinely unsettling. But nobody tested it for safety. Within hours of filming the first slime scenes, actors started developing rashes. The mixture was caustic. It burned skin on contact if left too long. And because the monsters were covered in it, the performers inside the rubber suits were basically marinating in chemical irritant. One actor developed blisters across his arms. Another had an allergic reaction that sent him to the hospital for 2 days. The production medic recommended stopping the slime scenes immediately. The director refused. They had a schedule to keep. So instead, they gave the monster performers rubber gloves and told them to avoid getting it on exposed skin. It didn't work. The slime seeped through the suits. It dripped into eyes. It got in mouths. By the end of filming, half the effects team had chemical burns. But the footage looked incredible. The slime glistened. It oozed. It sold the idea that these creatures were genuinely toxic, because they were. The movie's greatest visual effect was also its most dangerous practical element, and nobody warned the actors until after people started getting hurt. Number 13. There was supposed to be a sequel. Before The Green Slime even premiered, MGM was already discussing The Green Slime Returns. They had concepts, a script outline, plans for bigger monsters, more elaborate space station sets, and a higher budget. The idea was to turn it into a franchise, a low-budget answer to Star Trek with recurring characters and escalating alien threats. Robert Horton was approached about returning. He laughed in their faces. Richard Jekyll said maybe, if the money was right. Luciana Paluzzi never responded to the offer. The director, Kinji Fukasaku, wanted nothing to do with it. He'd moved on to other projects and considered The Green Slime a closed chapter in his career. But MGM kept pushing. They commissioned a full screenplay. They scouted locations. They even started designing new monster suits. And then the first film opened. The box office was modest. Not a disaster, but not the hit they had hoped for. Critics savaged it. Audiences were confused. And within weeks, the sequel was quietly canceled. All that prep work, the script, the designs, the location scouts, it was shelved and forgotten. Decades later, a film historian discovered the sequel screenplay in MGM's archives. It was wild. The plot involved time travel, clone armies, and a planet made entirely of sentient slime. It would have been even stranger than the original, but it never happened. The green slime remained a one-off curiosity, and maybe that's for the best. Number 14. The movie premiered in different countries with completely different edits. In Japan, the cut emphasized the monster action and downplayed the romantic subplot. In America, MGM re-edited the film to focus more on the love triangle and cut several creature scenes they deemed too cheesy. In Italy, distributors added extra violence and extended the death sequences to appeal to horror fans. And in Germany, censors removed all romantic content entirely, leaving a version that was just people running from monsters with no emotional context. This meant that, depending on where you saw the green slime, you essentially watched a different movie. Japanese audiences saw a monster spectacle. American audiences saw a melodrama with occasional aliens. Italian audiences saw splatter horror. And German audiences saw pure action chaos. None of these versions were the director's intended cut. Fukasaku later said he had no idea how many edits existed until decades later when home video releases started appearing. He watched the American version and barely recognized it. He watched the Italian cut and was horrified by added gore he never filmed. When asked which version was definitive, he said none of them. The real green slime, the one he actually made, never existed. It was cut apart and reassembled in different countries by different studios with different agendas. The movie became a cultural Rorschach test. Everyone saw what their market wanted to see. Number 15. One actor refused to take off his costume. His name has been lost to history, listed only as Slime Creature Number 3 in production notes. But according to crew members, he became obsessed with his monster suit. Between takes, instead of removing the hot, heavy rubber outfit, he'd sit in it. He'd eat lunch wearing it. He'd wander around the studio backlot, tentacles dragging behind him, greeting confused staff members. The costume department begged him to take it off so they could clean and maintain it. He refused. He said the suit helped him understand the creature's pain, whatever that meant. The director thought he was method acting and left him alone. His fellow monster performers thought he'd lost his mind. And the studio medic became increasingly concerned as the actor spent entire 12-hour shooting days sealed inside rubber and foam. Eventually, near the end of production, the costume department simply stopped asking. If he wanted to live in a monster suit, that was his choice. On the final day of filming, after the last shot wrapped, he finally removed it. His skin was pale, he'd lost weight, and according to witnesses, he looked genuinely sad to take it off. He stood there holding the empty suit like he'd lost a friend. Someone asked if he was okay. He didn't answer. He just walked away. Nobody saw him again after that. Number 16. The film's scientific advisor quit after 1 week. MGM had hired a real aerospace engineer to consult on the script to make sure the space station technology and astronaut protocols felt believable. He read the screenplay, took detailed notes, and showed up to set ready to help. Then he watched them film a scene where characters used fire extinguishers to fight electric alien creatures in a room full of exposed wiring. He raised his hand and politely explained that nothing about the scene made sense. The foam would conduct electricity. The characters would die instantly. The director thanked him for his input and shot the scene exactly as scripted. The engineer tried again the next day. He explained that the asteroid tracking system shown on screen was nonsense. The computers didn't work that way. The orbital mechanics were impossible. The crew nodded and ignored him completely. On day 3, he attempted to explain that explosive decompression doesn't work the way the script depicted. Again, nobody cared. By day 7, he realized his job was pointless. They weren't making a scientifically accurate film. They were making a rubber monster movie with science-flavored decoration. So, he collected his paycheck and left. Years later, in an interview, he said working on the green slime taught him an important lesson about Hollywood. Accuracy matters less than entertainment. And sometimes, especially in B-movies, accuracy doesn't matter at all. Number 17. The wrap party turned into a fight. After months of tension, cultural miscommunication, and production chaos, someone thought it would be a good idea to throw everyone together in a small Tokyo restaurant for celebration. It started fine. Food, drinks, forced smiles. Then Robert Horton, several drinks in, started complaining loudly about the movie. How embarrassing it was. How cheap it looked. How he'd wasted months of his life on trash. Richard Jekyll told him to shut up. Horton didn't. The argument escalated, voices rose, and suddenly, the two lead actors were standing face to face, ready to throw punches. The Japanese crew members tried to separate them. Someone knocked over a table. Plates shattered. Luciana Paluzzi left. The director left. Within 20 minutes, half the party had evacuated. The restaurant owner threatened to call police, and the producers had to physically drag both actors out separate exits. The next morning, everyone pretended nothing happened. MGM's publicity department released photos of the wonderful cast celebrating their successful collaboration. But everyone who was there knew the truth. The green slime didn't end with a bang. It ended with a near fistfight in a restaurant. Two grown men screaming at each other about a movie neither wanted to be in, while rubber monster suits hung in the background like silent witnesses to the whole disaster. Number 18. The film's poster was better than the movie. MGM's marketing department created incredible artwork featuring massive tentacle creatures attacking a space station, astronauts in dramatic poses, explosions, chaos, and that tagline, "It's coming from another world to take over ours." The poster promised an epic sci-fi spectacular. What audiences got was people walking slowly through narrow hallways, occasionally encountering rubber blobs. Theater owners were furious. They'd booked the film based on that stunning poster, and then had to face disappointed crowds who felt cheated. Some theaters demanded their money back from MGM. Others simply pulled the film after 1 week. But here's the strange thing. The poster became more famous than the movie. It showed up in film history books, monster movie retrospectives, and 1960s sci-fi art collections. People bought reproductions to hang in their homes. The artwork became iconic. Meanwhile, the actual film faded into obscurity for decades. It wasn't until home video, and then streaming, that new generations discovered the green slime. And many of them found it because they'd seen that incredible poster, and wondered what the movie was actually about. The poster promised something the film couldn't deliver, but in doing so, it created a legend that outlived the disappointment. Sometimes the dream sells better than the reality. Number 19. 2 decades after release, the movie found new life through midnight screenings and cult film festivals. What failed in 1968 became beloved in the 1980s and 90s. Audiences who'd grown up watching Star Wars and Alien could appreciate the green slime's earnest weirdness. They laughed at the rubber monsters, but with affection. They groaned at the awkward dialogue, but they kept watching. The film became a staple of so bad it's good programming. Repertory theaters would screen it alongside Plan 9 from Outer Space and Robot Monster. Film students would analyze it as an example of international co-production chaos. And slowly, gradually, the green slime transformed from forgotten flop to cult treasure. The cast members who'd spent years trying to distance themselves from the project suddenly found themselves invited to conventions and retrospectives. Richard Jekyll, before his death, attended several screenings and seemed genuinely touched that people still cared. Even Robert Horton, who'd spent decades bad-mouthing the film, eventually softened. In one of his final interviews, he admitted that while making the green slime was miserable, he understood why people loved it, because it was sincere. Even when it was ridiculous, it believed in itself. And in an era of ironic detachment, that earnest strangeness felt refreshing. Number 20. The monster's electric powers weren't originally in the script. They were added because the practical effects team couldn't make the creatures look scary through appearance alone, so they added functionality. The slime monsters could generate electricity, shocking their victims and shorting out equipment. It gave them threat beyond just gross blob that grabs you. But implementing the effect was nearly impossible with 1968 technology. They rigged the monster suits with battery packs and small lights, then used camera tricks and post-production animation to enhance the electrical discharge. Sometimes it worked, often it didn't. In several scenes, you can see the wires connecting the suits to off-screen power sources. In others, the electrical effect is just a bright light, with lightning drawn onto the film frame by frame. It was crude, inconsistent, and totally unconvincing. But it gave the creatures something unique. They weren't just space monsters. They were electric space monsters. That one added gimmick became the film's signature element. The poster emphasized it. The marketing focused on it. And decades later, when people remember the green slime, they remember the electricity. Not the plot, not the actors, just rubber tentacles crackling with poorly animated lightning. One last-minute addition to solve a practical problem became the thing the movie is most known for. Sometimes desperation breeds iconography. Bonus fact: the prop that sent people to the hospital wasn't a monster suit. It was a door. One of the space station's automatic sliding doors was rigged with a pneumatic closing mechanism that was supposed to shut smoothly when actors walked through. But the pressure settings were wrong. The door would slam shut with enough force to break bones. During the first week of filming, 3 different people got hit. A camera assistant's hand was crushed. A production assistant suffered a concussion. And an actor playing a station technician was knocked unconscious when the door hit him in the back of the head. After the 3rd incident, production was briefly shut down while safety inspectors examined the set. They found that the door's closing speed was nearly twice what it should have been. Someone had cranked up the pressure to make it close faster for dramatic effect. Nobody thought about what would happen if a human being was in the way. The door was fixed, pressure was reduced, and filming resumed. But you can see the fear in actors' eyes when they approach that door in the final film. They're not acting scared of monsters. They're genuinely terrified of being smashed by malfunctioning set pieces. In a movie full of fake dangers, the realest threat was a door.